Welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Dr. Lisa Brent. She's a naturopathic doctor. She's an acupuncturist. She focuses on women's health, and she is also my doctor, and I really think she's great. So I wanted to bring her here to talk about some of the things that I've been dealing with as it relates to women's health, as it relates to food and supplements and intolerances, and bring it all into the conversation, because I know if I'm asking this question, so many other people are. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I want to thank our listeners and our viewers, because truly, this would not be a podcast if it wasn't for those folks that tune in each week. And it's because of the questions that we get from you and the remarks that we get that I then look to bring key people in. And I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. And Dr. Brent is wonderful. And so I'm excited to have you here. So let's just get started. For those folks that are not familiar with naturopathic medicine, can we just give them sort of a high level of what is naturopathic medicine and how does it differ from being, what is the difference between an ND and an MD?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So naturopathic medicine or naturopathic medicine, you can say it either way, is essentially primary care natural medicine. So we're trained, the basis of our training is very similar to an MD, to a medical doctor, but where we differ is in our kind of toolkit. So our first 2 years of training are exactly the same. We take the same boards, but then our therapies move into more, lifestyle, diet, nutritional supplements, some medication usage like bioidentical hormone therapy, that kind of thing. If you're doing women's health, thyroid and adrenal support, that kind of thing. So, people see us sometimes as their primary care doctor. We don't do surgery or have hospital privileges or that kind of thing, but we can manage a lot of things both for acute and chronic conditions. And then sometimes people have us as kind of a specialty for their working on their gut health or their, women's health issues. So.
Right. I know that you founded Be Well Natural, which as I read about it, and it was a while ago because, I used to read your website all the time, and I've recommended it to friends in New York who have said, I'm not sure that we can do telemedicine with California. But, I was just so excited about what I read, because there's a lot of issues that people talk about, and this is outside of the scope of what we discussed, but Lyme disease and all these different things. And you have created and curated a group of people that can really talk to a lot of these specific issues. Mold. I remember when I first came to you, it was for mold. And, Lyme, I didn't have Lyme, but other people, Lyme, etc. So it's really, I think, and I hate to use the word holistic, but I mean holistic in a positive way, that, you look at the whole picture. And I was getting sinus infections, or what I thought was sinusitis or whatever. And it was that I had mold in my fit, and we got rid of that. And guess what? Now I don't have that. So that was my first entree into the Be Well Natural club, if you will. But now we've grown a little bit, and it's been a few years. And now I really wanted to get into a conversation with you about, I'm going to say it right, andropause and menopause and perimenopause and all of the pauses and what that means and what role food and supplements and HRT play in this. Because a lot of them are controversial. And I don't mean controversial necessarily in a bad way, but people have so many differing opinions, right? So I'd love to just start there. So, I can even say, like, on a personal level, when I came to you, I was a little nervous. I was going off the pill. I had kept that as a crutch for many, many years. Both you and Dr. McDougall had said 52 is the year, because that's the average age that people go into menopause. I was still a little scared. So 53 came around, and then finally I called you and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. So when other people, not just me, come to you for that, and they might not have been on the pill for all that time, do they often know that they're in perimenopause? Like, Do they know where they are? Because I would have had no clue, right? I could have been in perimenopause that whole time. And then, of course, as I tell you about all my symptoms and I learn more, I'm like, wait, that could have been all those things I was going through for the last 5 years. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what that conversation is like for you when people come.
Well, honestly, I think it's changed a bit in the last few years, probably, right? With more awareness out there, there's more conversation. A lot more famous people have hit midlife. So they're kind of using their platforms to share their confusing stories. Maybe they thought something else was going on. It turned out to be perimenopause or menopause. So that's been really helpful. I think prior to that, I probably like more women would come, or men, maybe in their 40s who probably the common theme would be, I just don't feel like myself. I'm not, I don't have the energy that I used to. I'm not sleeping as well. I'm holding on to weight. My libido's changing, my skin's changing. And so, sometimes it was, that was really helping women see like, and then you put that together with cycle changes and that kind of thing, like, yeah, this is probably hormonal. We always even still want to keep an eye out, are there other causes, other things going on? Is this, something to do with your thyroid or gut health or something else? But chances are, if things are starting to change, even kind of weird stuff like the frozen shoulder thing, or changes in vision, yeah, like the basket can be huge. And so anytime, from the early 40s to the early 50s, we want to keep that, the pause kind of question, or lens open, because it can be related to hormonal changes, and something can be done. So that's important too.
I think so. And I think that as I look back, right, because now this is personal, right? If you would have asked me this 10 years ago, I would have had nothing as an experience to share. But I look back and I was like, I used to get on a plane, no problem. And I used to, and obviously there's more plane issues, but in general, I would get on a plane, no problem. I get in a car. Now I think about, oh my God, there's so many accidents. I just have this conversation in my head where I didn't have that sense of anxiety before. I just thought, oh, I'm an anxious person.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good example. And I think it's an important part of this conversation too, about looking at the person as a whole and their phase of life as a whole, because like you might think, oh, I'm developing anxiety or depression sort of as a one-off thing, or now I'm developing insomnia as sort of a separate thing, or now my cholesterol's gone up and I have some heart issues. And if we treat all of those things separately, right, we may be missing a common kind of reason for those things. Doesn't mean we don't do something if needed, right? If you need something for that anxiety, we should do that. If you need some extra help, with cardiovascular issues, okay. But we want to make sure that we're looking at the bigger picture of where you are in life, because perimenopause, menopause, andropause is such a big biochemical shift that it can affect every system in the body, your joints, your mood, your sleep, your energy level. Yeah, your ability to switch time zones easily, the way you digest and absorb your nutrients. There's no system left untouched by hormonal changes. So we want to use that, as a filter to make sure that we're looking at the big picture.
So I come in, let's just say, right? And it's the first time I'm there and I'm like, okay, I'm feeling really anxious. I haven't been anxious. I haven't, and I don't love to fly. Can you give me a little Xanax for me to fly? And this seems like a normal conversation, right? Like, okay, you hear what's going on in the world, blah, blah, blah. But somehow these things, you're not taking them in the same way. It's a little bit more anxiety running. And to me, it was like, oh, it must be age. I remember when I was older, when I was younger, my grandmother would be like, oh, call me when you get home. Like something, call me when you land. My mother always would say, if you don't hear from us, it's good news. We landed. But But so my point is, so if I come in there and I say these things to you, and you're looking at my thing and you're like, okay, she's 47 years old. She's, what are some of the things that the person coming to you can ask? So if we have listeners that are tuning in today, or viewers that want to figure out, okay, is this regular anxiety, or should I be looking at this in a different way? How can they ask the right questions?
You know, I feel like it's our job to ask the right questions, actually. Your only job is to report, So, for example, in our practice, we have a very lengthy intake questionnaire. It's actually quite nosy, right? And we want to know a lot of detail about your history, trauma, where you grew up, what's are the genetic things in your family, what's your lifestyle, what's your stress level, all of that. And, if we give you the time to tell us, what's going on, and we actually really want to know, even if you don't think it's important, like, oh, by the way, my eyelid is twitching, every 3 days, or whatever it is. We just want to hear everything that's on your list that isn't feeling quite right, or you don't quite recognize, or wasn't happening 6 months ago or a year ago. And then our job is to try to be the detectives. Okay, what's going on here? What do we need to investigate? What's related to what? And really importantly, where do we start? Because we also don't want to do 10 different things or give you 10 different medications or herbs or that kind of thing. Like what where is the primary place of entry for us to start supporting you? And, what do we need to do to investigate? Do we need to do some lab testing? And then again, your only job then is like to report, like what's better, what's not, based on steps we take.
And I think that's really important, because I think that the things that we notice, if we're noticing, they're worth noting.
Absolutely. And I think we tend to be, I'll just say for women, 'cause I see a lot of women kind of in this, in your phase, what used to be my phase is, we just tend to adapt, right? Like, oh yeah, I always wake up at 3 a.m. now. That's kind of this new thing. It's part of aging, and I just have to get used to it. And so, we always want to know, kind of even the random things, if it's in any way affecting your quality of life. And then we kind of see it to the end. Maybe it is something new that you may have to adjust to, right?
Right.
But maybe not, and maybe that's really clinically relevant. So yeah, bring it all.
Yeah. And I would say, when I think back to like the last 10 years, and before that, I was always very cognizant of what I put in my body and how it made me feel. And it was fine for a while. And then all of a sudden, I started to get this bloating, and things were not digesting, and I wasn't being regular. Probably more information than my listeners want to hear, but nonetheless, maybe it will connect with them. I mean, right? But I, the truth is, by going off the pill, by telling you all those things, I was able to now be regular, now not have so many headaches. And, we added more than one magnesium, which I didn't realize. I figured one magnesium, what's the difference? You choose one. Should you really be taking 2 or 3? But they focus on different things. So there's been for the last 10, 15 years, people have been really supplement heavy. And what I've read here is that they're telling people now, okay, not so many supplements. And they're saying, just the core supplements, and be careful of the Ayurvedic ones. So can you talk a little bit about that? Since I feel like while I take a few, they're really very specific, but how should we be looking at that now as we integrate that in this next phase?
Yeah, I think it's a timely topic because there's a lot of stuff out there, and it can be very appealing. And if Halle Berry's taking it and she looks great, like I should do that too. And I mean, I get sucked into those things also. I think one thing is true, that as we sort of hit maybe 50 and beyond, we would like to get all of our nutrients from food. That would be ideal. A couple of factors that get in the way of that. One is our food sources are not as nutrient dense as they used to be, right? that's just a fact of our food supply. Even organic, it's just, there's just not as much nutrition in our soil that's transferring into our food. And so that can leave some deficits. And then our digestion changes as we age, and we may not absorb, even with a healthy GI, we may not absorb nutrients as efficiently, even with a really good diet. So we want to keep those things in mind. Then there might be some specific needs for you, like in your case, right? If you need some extra magnesium is a great example because most people do tend to be deficient in it. It's not very rich in the food supply, and we burn through it when we're under stress. So that's something probably we can say generally most people need. But then, what kind, right? There's like 10 different ones. And that's where getting kind of a customized or personalized program can really help, because maybe, you like the idea of magnesium, but you buy the one that gives you diarrhea instead of helps your headache. And then you can feel like that's not going to work for me. So getting some guidance along those lines can be really helpful. And then, with other nutrients too, we like to get specific. Like, do you need, maybe looking at your cardiovascular profile, it looks like you need more omega-3 fats, right? So great. We see that in your labs. This is a need for you. Then you're more motivated to take it, right? But rather than just a general, everybody needs that. So I'd say if testing is an option, it's a great way to get more dialed in. And then if there are specific conditions that we just know, say, things like ashwagandha helps with stress response, then we can make a little bit more generalized recommendations. But I think we should also be careful. You can gunk up your system with natural things, just like you can with medication if you're taking too much stuff. And we don't need to do that. And, if you have a fairly healthy, nutrient-dense diet, and then, maybe you're just supplementing a few things because, you're post 50, so a multi, and then that, and then whatever you're specifically needing on top of that, it's probably plenty. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to, think about it that way, because even the way that I eat has changed. And it changed in the last week, also from a week ago, interestingly. But I also, think that food, I remember asking you one day, and I think for our folks that tune into read our newsletter, you'll have seen, this is not the first time we hear from Dr. Lisa Brent. I had an issue when it's not that long ago, but when I was first going through this change from the pill to the estrogen and the progesterone, and I had texted you. You had texted me to just check in and see if I was still having the 4:30 in the morning headaches. And I said, well, that's getting better, but P.S. I have this huge zit underneath my skin. And you're like, oh, it sounds like you're zinc deficient. Do you eat pumpkin seeds? And I don't do seeds. And I don't do seeds a lot of times because I have always gotten some canker sores when it sort of just is something. So you're like, do you eat oysters? I'm like, score, I eat oysters. So I took it to a whole nother level. I think I might have mentioned lobster, thing, the whole thing, and it went away. So my question is, with some of these other things that we're talking about, exercise, weight gain, and weight gain, I think, is a whole conversation in of itself. So I was wondering what role food plays in this as part of the overall picture, and how you recommend and suggest that for people.
Yeah, well, with that,
it's kind of like you did for me.
Yes. Well, yes, not everybody needs oysters, but you did. So, and that's, you were very compliant about that. There again, there's sort of that's a good, sort of distinction between sort of what the general recommendations are, right? Especially for midlife women, high protein, low carb, that kind of thing. And then, what kind of your body's needing, which I thought you wrote about really well in that essay about like craving carbohydrates, right? And that was probably your body's way of raising your serotonin level and helping you to sleep better at night during this time of hormonal fluctuation. So It's hard to give across the board guidelines because everybody is different, phases are different. I do love the idea of listening to what our bodies are telling us that they're wanting, because it's often very wise if we cut out the noise and the judgment. And if we're moderate about it, then you get good information there. But there are some general things like during the hormonal changes of perimenopause and menopause, we think about phytoestrogen rich foods, right? So that's usually a pretty safe recommendation, like things that are a little bit higher in soy, maca, flax, chia seeds. They have phytoestrogenic properties that can help to stabilize fluctuating estrogen. Um, when we talk about helping to with like anxiety and also energy fluctuations, that's where the keep a steady diet, steady levels of protein comes in, right? And so that you're not kind of having blood sugar crashes, um, reducing alcohol and caffeine.
Well, I really, you kind of, I have like a sip of alcohol and I'm like, what is that? Why does that happen?
It's such a low return. There's a few reasons why. One is that during, especially when you're in that menopause transition, we're just less hydrated. Estrogen's very juicy, right? It hydrates our cells. It's, keeps everything kind of all of, our muscles, all of our cells are a little bit better hydrated with estrogen on board. And as that declines, we're slightly dehydrated. And so we don't metabolize alcohol as well. Also, the liver is pretty busy during this time. And so the work of metabolizing alcohol often will kind of take a back seat, and we're just not as efficient. Um, and then there's some other impacts too, kind of like the subtle biochemistry of like the changes in hormones and those interactions that make it just kind of not worth it, sadly, because often you're feeling kind of like depressed or anxious or something, and like a glass of wine sounds nice, but then it's not worth it.
After dinner, it just sounds nice. It's a hot day. You're like, oh, I'll have a glass of rosé, right? I give away my wine. I was like, okay, is it really hot in here or is it me? Because it's usually me. But the other thing that I noticed, and I'm sure some of our other folks, maybe they have different things that they've noticed, but I don't love eating hot food. Like I'll eat a hot steak. Different than what I mean by hot food is like hot coffee. I've now gone to iced coffee, iced espresso with a tad of milk, iced matcha. Like everything I want is like cold. Whereas I grew up in New York. I took a bath to get warm. I would drink and eat anything hot, soups, and we're finally getting into the winter. Maybe I'll feel different, but right now I got to tell you, I'm like all about anything that's cold.
Well, I'm sure that makes sense to you from the Chinese medicine training too, right? Like that.
All the information in your body too, and you're feeling it.
Yes, this is the time of yin decline, and so we crave sort of those more kind of yin like foods. They're colder, they're wetter, right? Yeah, like I think you mentioned cucumber, like iced coffee drinks. I mean, there's the basic thing that most of us are running hotter, so it does cool you down, but that also touches into the food as medicine idea, right? Like listening to that, like it actually feels good to have those cooler foods to help soothe your body temperature.
And it feels better. It feels better because I know that it was like when I would eat a piece of bread, if I woke up nauseous and I ate a piece of bread, I felt better. I've never had bread and decided, oh, that feels good, but it really did. And I don't eat a lot of bread, and I generally eat sourdough or something like that. But I think to your point, it's really important to listen to yourself. And you also mentioned moderation, which I think are really, I mean, my dad used to say that to me as a kid. He's like, everything in moderation, Justine, you'll be fine. Just everything in moderation, which changes the narrative for a lot of people because I think for me, I didn't grow up having to finish everything on my plate. I grew up taking a little bit. I didn't have anybody to compete with for food. There were no siblings, and I could always go for more. But I always took a little because I didn't want to waste it, and then I could go back. Whereas people get a plate of food, whether in the Midwest, wherever in the air, like for those, I mean, it's a big plate of food and they feel like they have to finish it. So as I'm listening to you and you're like, listen to your body, listen to when you're full, listen to what feels good is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of getting back to like that, almost like when we were children, right? And when we just did, like we ate when we were hungry, we stopped when we were full. Um, we kind of ate more of what we liked and less of what we didn't. And of course, our palates expanded. Now we use, more of our own wisdom. Like, yeah, I know this is gonna feel good for me. I know that this is gonna be healthier for me, but yeah, I think in some ways we've gotten away from the listening and into the shoulds, right? And yeah, like away from also, yeah, what's an appropriate, how much is enough, how much feels good. I think that even touches in. I listened to one of your other podcasts. You talked about kind of the industrialized food complex, and that's a whole other concept of where we've actually lost some of the signaling, like a lot of processed food. We've lost that ability to tell when we're full, and so then we overeat just because the brain isn't telling us, that was enough. But we do have that in there somewhere, or we did.
Well, I'm wondering, and I don't know, and I'm curious. So if you step back a few minutes, one of the part of what you were saying was in our agriculture, in our soil, there are not as many nutrients. And so we're not getting as many. And then we fast forward to the gut and digesting it, and we're not digesting it. So is it that we're not full, or is it that we're full, but we haven't gotten the nutrients? So are we still wanting to get more? So we're still eating because our body's craving that? I don't know if I'm saying this.
No, I hear what you're saying. It's actually an interesting question. Like, are we, yeah, is there something still we're needing or craving, or are we satisfied? And that might be a little bit of a difference between the feeling of fullness, like enough food, versus, yeah, did that food really make me feel good? Right? Like, was that what I needed?
Right. And I think that that's an interesting kind of conversation. And then I wanted to just resurface back to the agriculture and the lack of nutrients there, because there's a whole conversation about agriculture here in the US versus other places in the world, right?
I would hope so. Yeah, I mean, I'm not expert in this area, but I do see, like, you hear of a lot of really amazing movements in farming, right? Where like independent farmers are kind of reclaiming their land and nutrifying their soil. It's probably not the right word, and yeah, taking things away from kind of that industrialized, genetically modified seed, movement that really happened in this country, the 1950s and beyond, right? So I feel hopeful about that. I think, in that kind of metaphysical sense, the earth wants to nourish us. It wants to be in harmony with the human body. I think we just tend to get in the way and, like, do things kind of for the wrong reasons. But yeah, I feel hopeful about that. And will that be able to scale up to feed enough people? I don't know. Or do we need to have that be happening in all of the communities? So that, again, because one of the things I think that happens in Europe, or why people do better, there's less genetically modified farming, and also food doesn't travel as far, right? It's not, you're not getting your raspberries flown from Argentina, or, the things coming from across the country. So those things are fresher. They have a higher vibration, higher nutrients. They're, more recently from the ground or the tree or whatever. So, yeah, if we had more of that, we would probably be able to get more what we need from food.
So I just want to touch on one other thing that we had spoken about briefly. We were talking about all the pauses, and we did not talk about the andropause.
Andropause, yeah, for men.
Okay, pause. And so while I know we're really, in general, I write about women on, for that, but our Essential Ingredients podcast is really about the impact of food and sustainability on health and beauty and all these different things. So I do want to touch on andropause and talk about what are some of the things men can look for, because I don't think that that's really talked about.
It's
Is
not
it?
really as much. Yeah. I think one big distinction is sort of stating the obvious, right? Well, women have this very clear sign, right, when they've hit menopause because we cycle monthly. And this is like this indicator of things changing, and it's something you can really mark and time and measure, that kind of thing. So we get more signals that we're there, and probably stronger symptoms, right, with hot flashes and night sweats, things that can feel pretty obvious. Where for men, I think in general it tends to be more subtle. But what we do see for men, is that, as they move through their late 40s into their 50s and 60s, is that, yeah, that sometimes they can have lower energy. There can be depression. There can be sleep disturbance. They can find that they aren't losing weight as easily, and men tend to kind of gain kind of more of the stomach, kind of that, holding on to weight there. They can have changes in sexual function, right? Like erectile dysfunction or loss of libido. So they definitely have hormonal shifts. A lot of it's tied to the decline of testosterone, which is men's kind of main hormone. There are other hormones that play there for them, but that's kind of the biggest driver, kind of like estrogen is for us. And
Mhm.
again, it can be subtle, right? A man can just think, oh, I'm just getting older, or I'm just, my kids have left home, I'm maybe a little more depressed or something. But yeah, I think it is important to shed light on what can be some biochemical changes, and yeah, offer that support for them as well.
I think so. And I'm curious. I don't, I know that it's not talked about as much. And I know that, you know, if I have an issue with my eye, I'll tell Tim, oh, I have an issue with my eye, right? But we don't necessarily talk about menopause and andropause. I'm really having a problem with that word. Sorry, it's like a tongue twister to me. Um, so, I'm curious if there's any recommendations you might have if people are seeing some of these symptoms in their partners, husbands, wives, etc., and ways that they can bring it up that's respectful, but also thoughtful and caring, so that they can encourage them to have a conversation with somebody like you.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I often talk, because often if I see men, and they're often the partners of
Right.
women that I've seen first, and because I think women just tend to kind of seek
Yeah, of course.
out, health, and maybe especially alternative health stuff, which is fine. You know, I like to make the point that our health, like when you're in a partnership, say, a marriage or a domestic partnership, your well-being, like me taking care of myself, is good for my partner, and vice versa, right? If we're planning to age together and kind of go through our older years, like neither of us wants to be a burden on the other, right? And we want to have the same, like the level of energy and interest to do things, especially maybe after the kids have moved on or after retirement. You might have all these plans, and you kind of want to be able to do those together. So it's kind of a joint project when
I
you're
like
in
the way
relationship,
you carve
right?
that
Like,
out.
yeah, it's me. Taking care of me is for me, but it's also for you, because I don't want you to be stuck having to deal with me in a chronic illness in 30 years. We don't know everything that will happen, but I'm going to do my best now to invest in my healthy older age, so that, my children or who's ever in my life at that time, isn't stuck taking care of me. And so it can be sort of a joint project. And I think it actually is supportive if, both partners are making similar diet changes, right? Or, they're starting to eat, a more low carb or whatever. It's a lot less stressful than trying to eat differently. Or if both are cutting back on alcohol, it's a nice way to support each other, and, and to feel well, so you can actually really enjoy your lives together. And if there's something, when it comes to maybe seeking help for something more, I think, it can be maybe a delicate conversation, but, I've had women just suggest to their husband, like, oh, maybe the reason you're not sleeping well is because of your adrenal stress or something. And, and whatever it is
Very
that kind
polite.
of can bring them in, do
And
some, blood work, and Yeah. And then maybe we find some other things like some hormonal stuff or some other nutrient things and start on a plan. And then, the main motivator after that is if people start to feel better by making those changes, and then it takes on a life of its
Right.
own.
I mean, I can tell you that I've gone from going on the pill to doing the hormone replacement therapy. Is that correct? That's correct. And doing that and adding a few other things have really, like, I was so scared to do it. I think you can remember I was like really, because I had really bad PMS, but making this change, I'm not going to say the first 2 weeks weren't a little rocky, because they were, but the accessibility I had to my doctor at the time made it so much easier. And the quick fixes. Okay, so the communication was integral to me feeling better. And 2 weeks was not a long time. I mean, I used to feel ill 3 weeks out of the month when I wasn't on birth control. So that's what I had expected for menopause. So, I mean, I still get some hot flashes here and there, and there's still things to work out. But I think my point is, for those people that are tuning in, that, you know, for somebody like me that was nervous, this was actually like a pretty streamlined experience I felt supported. So I think it's important for people to have the support and surround themselves with it and integrate some of the things that we talked about. And I know that you have an upcoming um, I'm having symposium. So can you talk to us a little bit about that symposium?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so October 25th, we're going to have our fourth Women's Health Symposium. It's called Thriving at Midlife. And it's basically a day. It's 10 a.m. to 3, and it's a day of a panel of experts in, hormone therapy, nutrition, strength training. There's myself, there's an OBGYN, there's a therapist who's really wonderful, has a great approach about this whole midlife sort of, shift of identity. And we do some presentations, but we also have a lot of time for question and answer. And I just love it. It's very content rich. And then we also do some small breakouts. So if people want to do like a smaller session just to talk about, say, the GLP-1 medications, or just to talk about hormone therapy, or kind of a deep dive into strength training, we'll have some breakouts and then rotate those. And I just love it. I kind of felt drawn to start doing this when the whole Instagram wave started to hit, and so much information and books were coming out, which was so great. But I could tell that it was overwhelming for women, kind of like, this is all really interesting, but what applies to me? And when we get information, especially through social media, it's kind of one way, right? So I just wanted to have an in-person event or an opportunity, especially if someone's not really sure they want to become a patient or to have a one-on-one thing, or maybe they already are, but they want more information, to where we can just talk about stuff. And what I love is when we do the question and answer time, if one person has a question, 20 other people have that same question, right? So it becomes this really dynamic way of sharing information. So,
Was there anything you were really surprised about that people asked about?
let's see. Probably, I would say we started this 2 years ago. The last one that we did in the spring and the fall, probably that was the big thing around the weight loss medications. That was kind of when those were really sort of hitting the media. So people had a lot of questions about that. So that was, kind of caught us by surprise, but we're happy to talk about all that. And then I think there's still fears around hormones and hormone usage. So we get really, into the nitty gritty about that. So that's not so much a surprise, but it was, I guess, a little bit, given there's so much information out there, there's still a level of fear that is helpful to address for women.
I mean, I would say on a personal level, the things that those people asked, I would be curious about. I would be curious about the GLP-1. And then, of course, I mean, I started the GLP-1, right? Isn't that what I started, right? And all of a sudden now it's like my computer's listening to me and sending me things on Instagram that are like, you could take a pill, instead of getting a shot. And I'm like, oh my God, now I have 64 more questions. So if I'm getting that, but I'm just saying, so those, I mean, it's a very big question. And that just adds to your point and supports your comment around Halle Berry and that supplement, right? Because whether it's Halle Berry or the supplement that you could take that's going to be a GLP-1 and won't make you take a needle, which for those of you that don't know, my palms are sweaty just talking about needles. But, those are big questions, and I think a lot to talk about. And I think there's a lot of education people can get by participating in this, and it enables them to make more informed choices.
And it's
Right?
always changing, right? That's why, yeah, it's nice. Like we keep it ongoing because, yeah, like the same information, like there wasn't an oral GLP-1 6 months ago. And, so things are, especially in this, I would almost say almost like a gold rush of a movement around menopause, that it's confusing what's hype, what's real. Yeah,
I think that's really important. So those folks that are in the Bay Area, unless you do you do do you invite people to join through Zoom or anything, or is it
we
you
aren't
have
set
to?
up to do Zoom yet for this event, but we are next year. We're probably going to take it to some other locations. So stay tuned.
Okay, that's exciting. Okay, so the event is October 24th, did you say?
It's
From 10
Saturday,
to
October 25th, and
oh, the 25th.
information is on our website at bewellnaturalmedicine.net. There's a whole detail about the schedule and then a link to buy tickets from there. So.
Awesome. Oh my God, that's so great. I'm excited to go. I'm coming to that event. So I invite those folks in the Bay Area to send me a DM if you're going as well, and we can all meet up. This was so great. I have so many more questions. So we might have to do this again. But in the meantime, I encourage everyone to come join me at this symposium so we can ask more questions. And for those folks that are not familiar with your website, can you just repeat it again for them?
Yes, it's bewellnaturalmedicine.net, not .com. That's a different practice. I'm sure they're great, but that's not us. We are .net. Yes.
And if somebody wanted to reach out, what would be the best way?
We have, an online,
a contact form on the website.
Yeah, contact form. Thank you. What's the word?
Sounds like, looks like. Two
Yes,
syllables.
your name and you press submit. Yeah.
Okay, so yes. bewellnatural.net.
bewellnaturalmedicine.net. We're also on Instagram at bewellnaturalmedicine, so you can always send us a message that way. And Facebook is bewellmarin. So we're pretty findable. And I can send us an email. We have great staff that'll give a call back. And
just for those folks that may not be in the Bay Area, do you do telehealth?
We do telehealth. Yeah, those rules kind of changed a little bit during COVID. So we're back to where we're supposed to meet you in person once, and then we can do telehealth after that. Yeah, unfortunately.
All righty. Well, lucky me.
Yes, lucky me.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I want to thank our listeners and our viewers for tuning in today. I hope you found this as insightful as I did. And there's so much that we can take away from this. I just encourage everybody to ask more questions and tune in, because we do continue to have more information on these shows. And you can find Lisa, who's written some quotes for us and given us some feedback on some of the articles that we have. So make sure to subscribe to that. So we're at essential.ingredients on Instagram and at justine.reichman. And for those that are tuning in to the podcast, we also have a video cast on YouTube. So if you like this, if you know anybody you think this would benefit, share it with them. That's the greatest gift you can give them. So thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for joining me.